there is no plan B.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're going to do.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Welcome to Fuki Cafe. I'm Ivey Cone. Fuki Cafe is a safe place to talk about the difficult issues of our times. In fact, some of the predicaments of our times. And hence today's show, Living with a Predicament. My guest today is Janaia Donaldson. And I am so happy that we get to have a conversation today in front of cameras instead of on my back porch.
That's right. That's right. We've been doing that for over a decade.
Over a decade.
Yeah.
Indeed. So, welcome to
Thank
Fuki
you.
Cafe.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here with you.
Yes, and as producer and host of Peak Moment TV, in front of the camera is a familiar place for you to be.
Yeah, but I don't get to sit in this seat very often, so thank you for making that possible for me to be on the guest side of the story.
You're very welcome. And I know
Thank
that your viewers, of which you've accumulated quite a few over the years, will be so pleased to hear a little bit from you about the roots, the beginnings, how Peak Moment came to be.
Well, I'm going to take a flashback. I want to go back to the late 60s, which is when I first learned and read Earth Changes, the prophecies by Edgar Cayce, right, the psychic. And he talked about things like pole shifts, and the one that stuck with me was a picture of California flooded with only mountaintops, you know, the high peaks, and I was intrigued. It's like, what would cause that? The only thing I could think of would be the ocean rising, late 60s. Okay, snap ahead, late 70s. A friend and I were studying those more, and I thought, the Earth Changes, the prophecies, and I thought, I want to do a little scientific research here. This is, of course, pre-web. What might cause a pole change, and so on. And we even wrote an article for New Age magazine about that. What I tripped into along the way was some data that the 70s were turning out to be the warmest decade on record. Now, I didn't have enough to put those two together. And James Lovelock's view of the planet as a living system didn't really kind of hit my radar till later. So jump ahead to the late 80s, 1989. And my partner Robin and I are reading Bill McKibben's book, The End of Nature, in which he really declares and gives it language for the lay people that climate change is real, it's happening, here's the way it will show up. Well, 1989, it's sort of like no timing. We didn't have any reports coming in yet, although it was getting warmer and warmer. I figured that would be off past my lifetime. But it was the big one. It was the big worry. It's a big thing to work with, help us turn around this highly consumptive culture so we can save some planet, and get ourselves off the fossil fuels. So jump ahead to 2005. Spring of 2005, our local woman brought the movie End of Suburbia at the same time that James Howard Kunstler's The Long Emergency showed up, both of which said, peak oil is coming, it's going to change everything in our way of life, right? So right there is like, that was the big wake up. I felt like the universe said, bong, you have to do something about this. And what occurred to me is what they were saying was that the economic hit, as everything gets more expensive because we depend on petroleum for everything.
Literally.
Everything. For our food production and lots of products and so on. And of course, our driving,
carpets and cars, and
it's like we drown in it, we breathe in it, And I thought, that might be the wake up for people first. When it hits the wallet, because we can't afford things we used to, that may help be the wake up for the deeper problem of climate change. So it was the summer of '05 when you and Robin and I got together and we were talking about this, and we should do some video about this, and I want to credit you were the one that came up with the words peak moment.
I remember the day quite well.
Out on our front porch.
Yes, I actually woke up that morning. I was scheduled to come out and visit in your exquisite, woods.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my, because we'd been playing with ideas. We'd been bouncing things around. And,
peak oil,
this and I woke up and I went, oh, peak moment. Peak moment. I jumped and I drove out and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to tell him. I can't wait to tell him. Oh, they'll be so excited. I got real calm and I walked up and I sat down and we sat down and I said, well, I think I've got our name, peak moment. And you two looked at each other and you looked back at me. And Robin got up and left the table.
She did.
And went in the house, and about 10 minutes later, she came back and she said, well, bought all the domain names.
We got the domains. We got peakmoment.com, .org, .biz. It was so right. I mean, the electricity was like, for me, it wasn't just about peak oil, that we are at a peak moment in
the
certainly
human
planetary,
experience.
But certainly in the human experience. Absolutely. Yeah. So it was like the electricity was there. And it fit with this, with my experience of doing Peak Moment, because that was summer of '05. We started our first shows in '06, early in '06, in the very studios that were housing NCTV, Nevada County Television, which is where we're based, the successor place that we're taping this.
Right.
Because that was our venue for where to put our shows, was on our local community access TV station. And so after we began in this format, conversations with people who are not just thinking about the peak oil situation, but how do you live more sustainably? How do you live more lightly? It's given me a forum for all those things I've been reading about.
You really created a palette of resilient living in those early shows.
Ooh, I like that.
And I mean, you covered things from composting toilets, which you got a lot of great feedback on.
We did.
To rocket stoves, to communities coming up with alternate local currencies. I mean, the range is enormous, and I think you've produced at this point in time probably what, 300 episodes?
Not quite. We're 233. We've done this for 7 years. But you're right. And what's fascinating is that though I set out to see what people were doing to become more local, because it became obvious if you're going to be not going to get your food from 1,500 miles away, then and the whole gardening movement has just blossomed since then. But natural building and people biking and so on. And even though many of those people are doing it not because of peak oil and not because they're scared, any of that, they're doing it because it's the right and sensible thing to do. Robin and I have come away so inspired because so many people of good spirit, doing right things, trying to find ways to cooperate with each other. It's not what you're going to see in the mainstream press. I mean, I think that what I really realize is that it's not totally under the radar, but it's sure a little quiet piece of the radar over there. We started, it was in that first summer of '06, we did a trip to the Pacific Northwest and Central California and taped maybe 80 shows that we produced in the next few years.
Yeah, it's what you do in the winter.
All year round, but yeah.
Right, but I mean, getting
the
the shows produced that you taped.
So, and that's when we got on YouTube. YouTube was just getting a start, and one of our guests said, "You ought to be on YouTube," a nice young guy. And so we did, and so we are on the YouTube channel. So those are some of the threads, and what I didn't expect, I must say, is even though we've been at this for 7 years, wonderful, inspiring stories, I don't think I ever imagined the predicament deepening as quickly as it has in the last 3 years, 5 years.
The last 2 to 3 years or so, it has
just
been
ratcheted up.
Yes, at every quarter. I mean, not just climate change, although that is our main predicament, and it affects everything. And then some of the outplanes from that and that stress. I mean, people and plants and animals, even though they may not be consciously aware of it, sense this undercurrent that there's something wrong. There's something wrong. This is not right.
Terribly out of balance.
Out of balance, out of whack. What happened to the seasons? Got all these things going on, awry. But also within, which then creates these social and economic, in their own rights, they're predicaments.
We need to go back and mention, what is a predicament? I know you got that one in hand, so
okay.
Go for it.
Well, as Derek Jensen and perhaps others, I know Howard Kunstler has put it this way, and Guy McPherson might put it this way. Problems have solutions, and predicaments don't. Let me say that again. Problems have solutions, and predicaments do not.
So here we are with a predicament, meaning we could have come to some solutions back in the 70s when Jimmy Carter told us we're running out of fossil fuel. We could have retooled our whole culture, because it takes about 20 or 30 years to shift to a different energy base. We could have gotten the renewables and all kinds of things happening. Instead, we did the New Morning in America, or Good Morning America, with Reagan and company, and basically frittered away, I feel, is one way to say, our opportunity to get solutions to this. Therefore, since we don't have solutions that are going to fill in for, say, peak oil, what we have to deal with is then, how do we respond? Not solutions, but how do we live with this dilemma?
Right.
And I think that's, so I'm looking at, as you mentioned, there's a lot of layers to this. I'm sort of looking at this like a Chinese box, nested boxes, that have little things. That there's layers and layers of collapse happening now, and I should define what I mean by that. I'm using collapse in part in the sense that Joseph Tainter did in his study of the collapse of civilizations, where he says it takes a certain amount of energy to get more and more complex cultures, like, look at America, right? The electric grid, the LPG grid, the transportation grid, et cetera, et cetera. But as the energy is no longer able to hold that level of complexity, we collapse down to simpler and simpler forms. And so I think of it not as, the horrendous end of the world apocalypse, everything collapses like Tower 7 on 9/11, like a big pancake. Not that. But the things that we're experiencing now with sort of reaching the limits of growth. So one of those collapsed little boxes, it's the American Empire. That's collapsing. It's like we cannot continue to be fighting. I mean, America has been a country about, Morris Berman says, we're a country that's about hustling. It's like
only too true.
It's about personal profit, me the individual, and it's like, here we are in our heyday as the biggest consumers in the world, right?
Yeah.
And we are like,
disgusting.
We're like chewing through everything all over the planet.
I think of us as bacteria in a petri dish, and we've just gobbled up the nutrients, and now we're spilling out over the edges, and there's nothing left.
What we're doing is we're saying, I'm going to expand my territory, right? So we go from the west, and then we get the Louisiana Territory, and we get the U.S., and we run out of geography. Well, we start to do it with technical innovation. So we do lots of technology, and so there's part of why we all believe that technology will save us.
Such a myth.
The first thing that I thought of after when I learned of peak oil was, surely the corporations know that's coming down the pike. Surely there's a plan B. And Richard Heinberg, bless him, wonderful expert on all of the, actually peak everything is what he's really come to, said, there is no plan B.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're going to do. And it's like, oh my God, I have to give up the myth of technology will save us.
And I think that particular point, that they don't know what they're going to do, they know that it's like over the edge and free fall, and there are now 7 billion of us versus the 2 billion when I was born in early 1950s. They know that there's going to be a lot of unrest, a lot of hunger, a lot of anger, a lot of desperation, and so there's a positioning to control that, which is perhaps another entire show.
Well, in terms of that level of response,
yes.
I would say, yes, in a sense, we see business as usual, the globalization, let's go invade countries so that we can get their resources, let's the Chinese buy land in Africa for food because they know it's coming. And I think that, yes, in the U.S., we're certainly going to see far more the police state.
Yes.
I mean, we saw that in the Boston Marathon. when all the police showed up afterwards, like, what's this? Dmitry Orlov, who watched the collapse in the USSR and is just
Giving us
we're
example
right
after
on the,
example.
we're doing it the similar way to Russia in levels of, financial and political and cultural collapse. Lack of trust between people is part of that cultural collapse. And it's going to be worse in America because, A, we don't have a country that houses everybody. We don't have a medical system. That American hustling, individualism, kind of, you can make it yourself, individualism is not going to, it's like we don't have a safety net here.
No, one of the points that Dmitry has made is that in the Russian collapse, the people already were, for the most part, having their own kitchen gardens uniformly throughout the population.
And they were living in government buildings, so they didn't have rent. They weren't getting kicked out of their houses.
Right, there was not going to be any eviction, and there were, so they, in a sense, had done some pre-collapse, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the general population was somewhat prepared emotionally and psychologically and physically to withstand the full-blown collapse when it hit. Right. Americans are absolutely not prepared. A little bit. I mean, if you take, Nevada County has a population of about 100,000, and I would imagine that out of that 100,000, how many actually are growing their own food? It's not.
No, that's right.
90% by any means.
Or let's look at preparedness even for climate change. I mean, that's one of those sets of collapses is, yes, the American empire is coming down and the whole global corporate drive is really collapsing. Industrial civilization is collapsing.
But all of those nest inside the larger box of climate chaos.
And the big one is, of course, the climate chaos. You're right. And I think that it has accelerated so quickly. I thank Guy McPherson, who's the professor emeritus in environmental studies from Arizona State. His website, Nature Bats Last. Get that? Nature Bats Last. Yeah. Kind of humbling to remind us, that we haven't got any guarantees that the human species is going to keep coming.
No, in fact, there's a body of information building that shows that, in fact, we are looking at what is called near-term extinction.
Just before you jump into that one, though, I want to mention that on his website, what I appreciate is that he's compiling the latest reports from science that are on each of the 12 tipping points, which he brings out, so you can see the latest news. One new one that was added was from BP. BP, right? British Petroleum came out in January that basically said we're going to be at 4 degrees C increase by not 2100, not 2050, but 2030. That's only 17 years out. 17 years out.
17 years out.
And so Guy, as you say, brought up the notion, well, by the time we have that kind of accelerating chaos, one of the major factors will be huge dust bowls like we had in the 30s in the big grain-growing regions, meaning that habitat gone for growing food for humans. That's the collapse that he sees that will lead to what he believes is, take a deep breath, human extinction. That's, it's enough to think about the chaos, but to think that we're a youngster species, but still.
It's very difficult for any of us to try to wrap our minds around the notion that the upset to the climate is such that we may actually, in our lifetimes, be looking at a near-term extinction event. And I know you have something to share here because when we have these moments, and now it's moment after moment, and it's the constant of knowing that we have systems in collapse, we have climate chaos, which could end the human race. What do we do with that? Every day is a challenge. Well, how do I hold these knowings? How do I hold this just angst at what's happening on the planet? And it just blows me away. At the same time that I am fully present with my grandson throwing bread to the birds. Right. And I'm holding both of those things, near-term human extinction and my grandson throwing bread to the birds. It sets up such cognitive dissonance that sometimes I think I'm going to explode.
Well, I think that the starting place for that is it has to start sort of here. It's like it's got to be okay to feel what you feel. I mean, the angst that you feel. or the huge grief I feel for all the species that are going extinct, even as we are destroying everything. I mean, we're accelerating the extinction with our consuming activities and destruction of habitat everywhere. So I think it starts with even being willing to just let it rumble around in there. Yeah. Let it rumble around.
Yeah.
And recognize that, like the Matrix, ordinary reality is going on all around us and everybody is living in the dream. Even as, we are the burning platform, we're eroding everything. I think, so for me, it has to do, but it goes in stages. There are times in which I feel like we're doomed, it's over. And then there are times when I do some action, like hugging your grandson, right, or enjoying the birds, or planting something, or meeting somebody that's doing locally grown beef, or
being
other
there
action
for somebody who's in complete meltdown,
right,
who's lost their home.
But it starts by not denying it.
But it's exactly. It starts by not denying it, by having courage and looking at it. And I know that we have so much. We could talk for an hour and a half, and we did recently, but we've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay, good.
So I want to get to this woman because this is
a gem.
This is the woman who came up with the notion of random acts of kindness.
Anne Herbert wrote. She was part of the Coevolution Quarterly, and she wrote this. 1995. She saw it coming.
This is from
1995.
Okay.
Handy tips on how to behave at the death of the world. Sometimes it comes in a dream, and sometimes in one more newspaper headline, and then with your cells and past and future, it's over. We are killing it all, and soon it will all be dead. We are here at the death of the world, killers, witnesses, and those who will die. How then shall we live? And she starts with, probably good to tell the truth, live in your integrity, avoid being shoddy, doing weird stuff, try and let go of your power over stuff. And then she says, be in radical alignment with particular forms of aliveness that are being smashed. Particular species, human cultures, styles of living are being obliterated brutally now. Inasmuch as we're all going to die fairly soon, the stylish thing to do is to align with one of the life forms and help it be itself as long and strong as possible. And I think of our friend Tara, who's there for the salmon. I mean,
Absolutely.
It's like, oh, yes. Eschew blandness, eschew causing others pain. We're all the targets, so wear bright colors and dance with those you love. Falling in love has always been a bit too much to apply to one person. Falling in love is appropriate now to love all these things that are about to leave. The rocks are watching, and the stars and the squirrels and the tired people in the street. If you love them, let them know. With grace and non-invasive extravagance. Care about the beings you care about in gorgeous and surprising ways. Color outside the lines. Practice random acts of kindness and senseless acts of beauty. This is your last chance. So there is one of my moments. This painting that I did called We Live Here, meant to be said with wonder and awe, as this circumzenithal arc came just above our meadow. A light, fragments of ice creating this light with sundogs around the sun. It was like, one doesn't live to get to have a visitation like that. So.
Magic, and that was the inspiration.
And that was the magic. That's what I painted, sort of from the meadow's view or the fisheye's view. But I felt like we were this little point that this could only be seen within a few hundred yards. That in the middle of the cosmos, that little moment of magic is one of an evanescent, ephemeral moment of magic. And I am so grateful just to be here to witness it. I mean, we are living in unprecedented times. We get to witness, I'm curious. I didn't say it would be easy.
No, not easy. And in the midst of the craziness and the busyness, things are just going so fast. To just stop today. Here's an example. I was walking into the building, and there were two lizards, and one of them ran right along and went down, and the other one ran along but slowed down and then jumped up into the sunshine on the wall to warm up enough to be able to continue its journey. And I just stopped everything. I wasn't thinking about sitting here with you doing the show. I wasn't thinking about my grandson. I wasn't thinking about near-term extinction. I was just resonating with that lizard in the sun, soaking up the warmth. And that is something that we can all do at this time.
Yes.
As the world is going down because of human activity. You know, Thomas Berry famously has said that the human has become a geologic force.
And he and others have said, remember that even if you feel you can do nothing physically, you feel helpless, the fact of taking moments like that reminds us that consciousness is here right alongside form. And so that consciousness of being generous or helping others or celebrating life as it is, I mean, that's part of what I put into my painting with a heart labyrinth. I mean, here's the planet. And here is, you know, a labyrinth of a heart that we're trying to figure our way through in the heart of the cosmos. And what we are doing is coming up with a new consciousness. Because we're partly the universe reflecting back on itself. That's part of our job.
That Thomas Berry also said that.
I love that.
You know,
I love that.
Self-reflective awareness, the human as universe, reflecting upon itself, and that folding back. So even in the midst of total devastation on the planet, and this enormous grief and angst that we are all feeling, human and animal and other.
Oh yes,
I mean,
all of them more than humans. I mean,
just the agony.
Goodness.
There is an emergence that's occurring. It's the emergence of the new era, whatever that may look like. And there is that folding back and that self-reflective conscious awareness. And if we can be with that and be that and help to minimize the suffering of those around us. Perhaps in this last, I think, minute or so, we should take a very quick look at that beautiful painting that you just referred to.
Thank you.
And just, my dear, it's just been so nice to sit here and chat with you. It's gone by that quick.
Absolutely. They always do. They always do.
You know, maybe we'll catch up with each other again in the same place and do another one of these. I want people to know that out there in the universe, they can get a hold of more information, fabulous information at peakmoment.tv, www.peakmoment.tv, as well as Peak Moment on YouTube. Fuki Cafe is also able to be seen on YouTube. And so I think we have that last beautiful still. What was the name of it again?
I call it the Planetary Heart Labyrinth.
Planetary Heart Labyrinth, and here it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
On the matrix of the interior of some titanium atoms. So the little blue lights are like stars, and yet they're the inside of a titanium atom. Wow. So we are, you know, we are participants in this glorious universe. And my prayer that I was thinking as I did this is for all of the more than human peoples, the animals, the birds, the habitats, the water, the fish, the bacteria, the lizards.
Yes.
That we can hopefully save the world for them, even if we're not going to.
Even if humans are not going to be here. And on that note, we are going to wrap up and say thank you for joining us for this Fuki Cafe. And we look forward to you joining us again. And I encourage you to have these conversations with those with whom you can. Until next time, I'm Ivey Cone and Janaia Donaldson. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you.